What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another brand new Rugby Muscle podcast. I'm your host, as always, TJ, and today I'm joined by Jamie Bain of Rugby Renegade. Actually, more accurately, I'm joining him on the Rugby Renegade podcast because he ended up taking the reins of this one. We are co-publishing it, of course, as you're listening to this on the Rugby Muscle podcast, but he's also publishing it on his Rugby Renegade podcast. So if this is your first time you've come across from the Rugby Renegade podcast, I don't know why you didn't just listen to it there, but whatever, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you give us 5 stars on Spotify because that's really important. And if you're someone that always religiously listens to the Rugby Muscle podcast, but you don't know what Rugby Renegade are and have never listened to their podcast, I would suggest going over there and listening to them and seeing what Rugby Renegade is all about because we share a very, very, very similar message. Okay. And in this podcast, we actually end up discussing basically where our messages align and big mistakes that we see people, amateur players, mostly what they do in rugby strength and conditioning. So I said I'm not going to keep doing these preambles. I've got a plane flying over my head just to make sure that I cut this one short. So enjoy this episode. This is the podcast with Rugby Renegade's Jamie Bain.
Hey TJ, welcome to Rugby Renegade podcast. Great to have you on. We normally start by sort of getting your background, but just to kind of preface this podcast, we're going to use it on both of our podcasts, so there'll be a bit of back and forth. But let's start with you telling us a bit about your background, how you got into strength conditioning and working with rugby players.
Yeah, so my story is almost like that one of like repeated failure, and that sort of led me to the eventual path that I found myself on, which is, I look back and you sort of upset about all the failures, but really if I didn't have all of those, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm quite happy with that. So originally was a state school rugby player, managed to captain my county team, went to university in Bedfordshire, actually. And before I did that, I took 1 year off to sort of see if I could go pro or see if I could like push that sort of side of things and really take my rugby serious. And in pre-season, I tore my knee ligament. So started looking into the coaching side of things, sort of also fell in love with the gym at the same time, went to university, carried on loving the gym the whole time. And then from there, like as the rugby career wasn't working out as I'd hoped, like I still was happy with where I played, but it wasn't exactly what I'd hoped. I figured out that actually what I'm going to do instead is sort of use it to travel. So after university, went from Bedford I was playing at Ampto at the time. Okay. Went from there to Las Vegas, of all places.
Wow, that's a big
play. Yeah, fresh out of university as well. It was ridiculous. Went there, played there for I think it was 5 or so months. Realized that I don't want to come. I'm not ready to go back to England. So then ended up in the Middle East playing rugby as well. And I found myself with quite a bit of time where I was in between, because when I went to the Middle East, I started personal training as well to go alongside it. And I really found myself with like so much time to sort of develop something of an online presence. And I didn't want to follow the road of just doing what everyone else does with fat loss. So actually, that's a lie. I did. That's what originally I did. I was trying to, in person, I was coaching mums. I thought I could just open up some sort of membership site to have people follow me. And then I realized like I'm not really speaking to anyone. And the more I was like just being myself, what I realized was I could really help rugby players, because I had spent in this time from my year off when I busted my knee all the way through till present moment, which is like 2012 or something, or 2013, like just researching gym stuff. I was like, on T Nation or listening to, Jay Ferrugia.
Yep.
Yeah. I came across his book like early doors, and that sort of changed the game for me. And I really realized, I was like, oh my God, like this is like all men's fitness stuff is just nonsense, but that's all people follow us because that's all we know.
Yeah.
And so I figured that actually what's missing is some sort of bridge of the gap, right? Because you've got this level of real like high quality strength and conditioning that's meant for professionals, and then you've got that advice almost being repeated for or regurgitated for amateur athletes that just don't have the time to do that or don't have the physical ability to do half those things or the need.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, let's push rugby muscle and really see what we can do here. And since then, that would have been 2015-ish. Like we really first started going with that. It's been trickling along in the background because I've been working alongside a personal training business at the same time. And then maybe 3 years ago now, I went full time with it and have kept pushing the podcast. I've just been enjoying working with like not a great deal of clients, but just enough that I can always give them enough quality advice and like build personal relationships and help them progress.
No, that sounds cool. Like, glad you touched on that because that's kind of a mistake we made initially starting out with Rugby Renegade. You know, we started because we wanted to deliver, you know, really good content, and we've kind of made mistakes as players ourselves. So we wanted to kind of prevent that, you know, amateur players making those, and we thought by delivering or explaining what we were doing with pro athletes, that would help them. But yeah, one of the first things we learned was, they don't have access to the facilities, they don't have the time, you know, resources and that type of thing. So we really had to kind of boil it down to what really works and what can actually be applied by them. So it's cool that you sort of picked up on the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. Like the most simple things, like most gyms don't have sleds, or we're starting to get more and more blessed with gyms that have like bumper plates. But when I first started, like we're not dealing with any of that stuff.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and like we did a lot of stuff, and it's still, there's people out there interested in it, and I guess S&C coaches read it, but like we do stuff about velocity based training and all that sort of stuff, and GPS data and things. And yeah, the amateur athlete doesn't have access to that, and maybe some aren't fussed, but they want to know what will improve their performance. So that's what we've kind of had to pivot and twist in that way.
Yeah,
we're kind of on the right line of the question we always ask all the guests on the podcast is what do you think the biggest mistake rugby players make when it comes to strength and conditioning?
Do I have to pick one?
Well, you I think do top three.
yeah. I could do top 20. The number one kind of is the root of everything, is like going in without a plan. And I think you could say whether that's going into the gym on any given day or starting any given week, or even like in general, looking at what you actually want to achieve from the gym. Like I think we think, oh, I want to be a better rugby player. That's it. But there's so many different ways that you can accomplish being a better rugby player. You can get stronger, you can get more explosive, you can get fitter. You know, you can, like, some people can lose weight, including losing muscle, and that might actually make them a better player. But until you take the time to really think about what it means to you, like anything works and nothing works all at the same time. So none of the other mistakes, I guess, really matter unless you figuring out what you want to achieve and then what your plan is to achieve it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something we kind of tried to pivot to be able to help people figure that out themselves. And like you mentioned men's fitness, you know, earlier, and like a lot of times that's where people get information. And I've seen in the past, they'll show a rugby player's program and you're like, there's no way, either there's no way a rugby player is doing that program, or it's just something that isn't applicable to that, or it's applicable to that rugby player for a certain reason because they've got a long training history. So your average athlete or average amateur rugby player wouldn't be able to follow that program and get the same results. So it's kind of figuring out what is ideal for them. And like I said, the main thing is the reason they're doing it is to improve their rugby performance. And sometimes that gets lost and they follow, you know, whatever program they've seen on Instagram or whatever. So yeah, great point. Did you have any more you wanted to bring up? I know
I think, no, just along those lines, it's like people don't know where to start because of that lack of a goal almost, like, you know, and so we all do it, right? Like if we don't know what we're supposed, like what we're trying to achieve, we just copy what everyone else is doing. But there's so many different goals. Like you said, like when men's fitness share like rugby player stuff, or even like on the YouTubes with the when England posts the gym sessions and stuff, like that's just a tiny snippet. Like you have no idea of the context of what they're trying to achieve by doing it. And it looks cool. And I did it, like, you know, back when I first started, I remember like you now look at it, the video now, and it's like the most pixelated video. And there's Byron Kelleher doing like he's got like 60 kilos or something. And he's doing pull-ups. I was like, oh, cool. I've got to do weighted pull-ups. And I'm like, why am I following this guy? It doesn't make any sense. But you don't really have anything else to go on. And it's what I found. I don't know if you experience the same. It's very difficult to give because there's so many ways to solve the problem of being a better rugby player. And there's so many different like circumstances that people have with their lives. It's really difficult to give black and white answers because like I say, anything can work or also nothing can work.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes struggle, and it feels like you're being a dick when they're like, oh, do I need to do front squats or back squats? Like I got this question like yesterday. I'm like, that's not a question, really.
Yeah. So I'd be interested. How would you go about dealing with that? What would you kind of say? This is the question you should be asking.
Jamie, are you asking me if you should do front squats or back squats?
No. We all know it's front. Okay. I guess how you approach dealing with that, because sometimes if people like say people want that black and white answer. So how do you kind of reframe it to kind of get the message across that they're sort of?
The answer to that question would be like both work, right? It depends on the exact phase and what you want to achieve. Backs, you would give the examples, I guess, of what solutions, I guess, these movements are, right? Or what jobs these tools are good at. And then it's up to the person asking the question to figure out what the solution they need. So like, and every movement, every exercise, and it gets even difficult with like when you're talking about exercises, because a back squat for 20 reps can be very different to a 1 rep max back squat. So, and the more you do this, and I'm sure you experience the same thing, the more skin in the game you get, like you also start everything, you end up being like completely abstract. And that just, it is difficult because that people listening to that, they don't want that. They want some sort of idea. So I would just say, okay, if you want to, both can work. If you're looking for hypertrophy, both can work. Problems with front squats you're going to run into is that your core is going to generally fatigue if you're going high reps, and that ends up being a limiting factor. So, do you want is that the goal of your front squat? Probably not. So then we probably want to look at back squat, but then maybe even if you don't technically back squat well, it might even like neither could work. Maybe we're looking at a leg press or whatever, And again, it's like the guy just wants a simple answer. Tell me, is it front or back squats? Sorry, dude. Like, it just doesn't. Like, you can't. And like, maybe, like, and I think this as well. And I'm sure you think this when you're doing like your social media stuff. Like, I could have 100,000 followers by now if I'd have put if my sole aim of my content was to look cool and do sort of funky Joel Seaman-esque exercises or whatever that look different, right? But they ain't helping anyone. And at the end of the day, like I want to look back on my business and the training I do and the relationships I build and like have that all be genuine,
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's interesting that the example you brought up was the front squat, back squat, because that is a common one. People or players, I guess, get caught up on the minutiae of exercises when I guess what I'd say to them is, well, why do you want to know what you're trying to get out of it? Because that then dictates which one you use to a certain degree. I mean, like Dan John always used to say, the answer to every S&C question is it depends, isn't it? Like there's so many things going into it. But if you can relate it back to why you're doing it, that helps you kind of formulate an answer, or helps them formulate an answer, I guess. But I mean, so we talk about exercise selection. This is one of my bugbears is kind of sport specific exercises and training like that. And most of the athletes we work with, they're I mean, there's a debate of whether you use them with elite level players, but with our guys, it's sticking to those basics. What's your opinion on that? And you see that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, again, we're two guys that own businesses that are dealing with gym programs for rugby players. Like, if there were people that you would listen to tell you about the importance of functional rugby specific exercises that would boost your performance, like we would be telling you that's what to do, right? But we're not. Like, it isn't. It's a fallacy, because you get your specific work of rugby when you're doing your rugby.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't, like that definitely does annoy me. And what I found, I don't know if you found this as well, when we had the long breaks for COVID, like I had so many of my guys, all of them actually, to be honest, come back like so much fitter, because we got time to really develop their energy systems, as opposed to constantly, like when you're doing rugby and when you're doing even, if it's a Tuesday, Thursday night for training for a team, or any night or any training session, like a lot of the times that's almost like a test. It's not a training session. Every training session is a test. Like you're auditioning to start on the weekend.
Yeah.
And you go at full intensity. And so you're really pushing yourself. You're not spending your time training. You're not really developing your energy system. You're just working as hard as you can.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not the stimulus you need to really develop a strong aerobic system, which supports everything else. And obviously your alactic, ATP, PC system as well. Like you don't develop that. You just do what you can do. Same thing. Like you wouldn't just play games of rugby to develop your pass. You would break down different passing drills. So you use your sport as a sport, but then you take a step back and develop either the physical qualities or the skill qualities like separately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to answer your question, like in the gym, do gym stuff, like, and have that gym stuff prepare you better to be on the rugby field. You don't want your gym to look like rugby.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, you touched on two really nice things, and it's probably going to be call it the Big Mistakes podcast episode, like special.
Yeah.
You've touched on two that we see there, and one was, like you said, about rugby training actually it kind of turns into a test and maximal. So we tend to see boys just work too hard, like, and you mentioned ATP PC system. You need to be recovered for that, and we had a great guest blog a while back from Ryan Gibney, where he was talking about how people go and do a speed session, and rugby players, we see this a lot with them. They'll turn it into a conditioning session because I can't be resting for 2 minutes, and it's just it turns into endurance. Do you see that? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
speed. Like the amount of people that want to work on speed but don't actually want to work on speed. Like they say they want to work on speed, but they also want to be tired, or they want to do it with like a really heavy sled or whatever it is. Yeah, 100%. Speed's like it's really easy to train, but people miss it so much because they try and make themselves tired, and then it's anything less than, like, they say 90%, but I'd go even higher, like 95%. Like I want to be fresh when I'm doing my speed work, because that's, again, you're trying to develop that quality. Do you find it hard when you're in your professional environment to get the time to have guys that are fresh enough to do your speed work?
Yeah, so I mean that's what I'd say in the professional environment. It is the time constraint is the issue. I mean, there's still that the players would still struggle with having rest, but we just don't have a time. So it's those little bits dripped in when we can get them.
Kind of, because you kind of have to. I see it like you have to have like a rest sandwich before and after speed work, right? Like there's no point blasting. You can't do speed work if you're already going into it tired.
Yeah.
And then you want to give yourself a little bit of time so that you don't end up pulling a hammy or doing something afterwards as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way I do it is I try and get it into warm-ups, some sort of reactive agility and some acceleration work usually. And then it's with, players who don't make the 23 for match day, then we'll get top-ups, around that. But yeah, that's one of the challenges. But that's helped me then work with amateur athletes to realise as well that we can fit in those little bits, and it's kind of educating them when they can do it as well.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, I guess, like amateur athletes are usually, like, if you're dealing with pros, like if you name a pro rugby player, probably because they've already got some level of speed to them, like they probably have a decent level of natural ability.
Yeah.
Whereas like you get some people on the amateur that are just slow as shit because they've never learned how to run or sprint. Yeah. And so just doing that for a couple of months, all of a sudden, like I've had a few guys that have been flankers or been a scrum half, and then they've moved out to the wing. Right. Just because they've got speed, like into their 30s as well. They've got faster in their 30s. It's like, well, yeah, because you haven't ever trained it, so you're brand new at this.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
But I think, yeah, speed is, man, yeah. I like the non-23 as well, doing it, or on the game day. I think that's something I like to use is if I do have to work it, or if I have to, I think the day before is also quite a nice little opportunity, a window
Yeah.
for a lot of guys, because again, you're trying to leave yourself being fresh, to be fresh for a game.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing that, like that day before is a nice little window where you're already pretty fresh. And if you're doing a speed session, you're not going to cause enough fatigue for it to really affect you the next day, right?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I haven't thought of that, because I guess mentally as well, it's easier for them to go along with that. I'll have rest, so I'm fresh, because they're thinking about the game as well. So yeah, yeah. And then the other thing you touched on earlier is kind of just doing too much, essentially trying to train every physical quality, because that's one of the challenges of being an S&C in rugby is you've got to have good levels of all of them, or you've got to train to a certain extent. So how do you get around whether it's kind of covering everything off or focusing on that one individual quality that will get them the best results?
It's a bit of both. So it's like, I think to maintain any physical quality, it's like what 20 you need like 20%, if that, of the volume that it is to develop it. So what most people do is, because they're trying to do everything's about that, say we've got that 20% is to maintain, they'll push that to about 60. So it's not enough to actually get any development in all these different areas, but it's a lot more than they need to maintain. So we pull back on everything that, again, this comes back to having a plan and having some goals. So we get back to, okay, what are we looking to develop? Which we can even touch on how to figure that out. But everything that we pick 2 or 3 things at most. So whether that's speed, whether that's strength, power, aerobic work, whatever it is, right? And we dial those things up to 100%. And then everything else gets left back on 20. If we don't have the time to develop 3 different things, pull back on like 2 real ones. All of a sudden, you've opened up so much time to actually really develop those 1 or 2 qualities. You'll be really surprised at how easy that is once you've dialed that back. And once you realize that you're not going to lose out on those areas that you're only maintaining at a 20% rate, like, just makes so much, it frees up so much time. And also like mental, there's like a level of anxiety that, I mean, I used to get it. I'm sure you do the same thing as a coach and as a player. Like, crap, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. Like the worst feeling in the world for a rugby player is to lose a game and then go, oh crap, that's because we didn't try hard enough this week in training, or we didn't push ourselves, or whatever. Like, everyone's afraid of that feeling.
Yeah.
So they default to doing way too much. So, this could just be an hour-long sort of plug for, the importance of a coach or some sort of level of accountability. But once you've got someone in your corner that knows what they're doing and understands this process, you're given that permission to pull back on everything, because you've got those 1 or 2 areas that you really are focusing, and you will see that development. Like, you will. Like, there's no way you won't. And if you don't, then all right, sack that coach or change your approach. But I mean, it's still, even if you don't make loads of progress in those 2 areas, you're still not getting any worse.
Yeah, and I think you're right about saying it's like a bit of a plug for a coach, but that's a lot of what we've ended up doing with our amateur athletes is kind of guidance about kind of, like, even when there's injuries, or when there's the match day changes to Friday, and how to tweak their training week. It's just having someone, that point of contact, to then like answer those questions they have, and that's a massive thing. If you haven't got anyone, then a lot of times you see people just go and do nothing, or the worst thing, worse. And the other thing, like, in answering that question, you started with saying it's a bit of both, and that's kind of what I've done over the years. I learned interned under someone who did a lot of block periodization and saw really good results with that. And then later down, I worked with someone who trained everything concurrently and had good results with that. And now it's kind of a hybrid of that. And I guess it's what you say is everything is present, but one or two things are really emphasized, and that's what you're trying to get your adaptations to. And even, like those things that everything's covered, some of that will be in the rugby training. So you know, if you get some sort of endurance element out of that if you're running around for 2-3 hours a week. So that's my kind of philosophy on that.
Definitely. A lot of it's covered in the game as well, right? Like there's no better training. It's not perfect, but that's a hell of a lot of the stimulus you're getting in one day.
Yeah. And it's the most specific one, isn't it? You know, that's what
100%. Yeah.
And that's the one thing I think amateur athletes don't take into account, that you know, that counts as a training session essentially.
I remember when I was playing once, like I was 17 and I was playing like some like low level tour. I remember one guy went to the gym after a game. He was a hooker. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to the gym now. What? Like, okay. I remember it just blew my mind at the time. Obviously, because I was already like in that performance mindset. The game day was everything. That sort of opened me up. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I've known similar players. They punish themselves for a bad game. You go, I didn't play well. I went to the gym and just thrashed themselves. Just digging into your recovery reserves. Because that's the way I try and explain it to my athletes is you've only got so much amount of energy to recover and adapt. So if you're trying to do, you know, like I said, the 60% of everything, you're just going to either overtrain or just not be able to recover and adapt. So you're not actually getting better. Whereas if you've got that 20%, you know, keep everything ticking over, and then 100% in those 2 or 3 things, that's how you've got the energy to adapt to those.
Yeah, and I think that's where setting a goal comes like full circle as being like so important, because you also like if you know, setting your goals is one thing, but setting your goals for like a year from now, like you want to improve at 8 different areas. Well, if you give yourself 2 years to do that, then you don't have to worry about doing everything in 4 weeks, like because that's just not going to happen as well. Like, and if it like say if it was right, say if you spent 4 weeks and all of a sudden you gained 3 pounds of muscle, you got fitter, you got stronger. What else? You got more explosive. Your agility came along. Like you improved in all these areas. Like, do you think that's just going to keep happening? Because if it did, then you'd be the world's best player in a year.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work like that. You have to take your time, and people understand that, and they really know that, like consciously, if they take the time to take a step back and think about where they want to be. But most people don't. Like they just want to get everything in 4 weeks and then just, I don't know, like do nothing because they've already reached the end. I can't understand. Like I can't. I'm so far within this. Like you have to think long term. I can't really relate to why people do that. Like why they panic and set these short term goals, and then because inevitably, like it comes down to consistency as well. Yeah. So they put an unrealistic workload on themselves, and then like inevitably they fail. And for professionals, it might be because they hurt themselves or they get burnt out. For amateurs, it's probably just going to be like way too much. Either way, you then waste time either injured or burnt out or whatever, or feeling guilty because you didn't suck it up and stick with the program. And then
sorry, TJ, Mike's just dipped out there a bit.
Do that. And then,
yeah, that's like a bit better.
Hold on. Let me. Are we back in?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, sweet. Where were we? Yeah. So what happens is that they set themselves because they're setting themselves on such a short-term mindset. They try and do everything, and because they inevitably fail, that then just exacerbates that short-term mindset because they're trying to make up for lost time, and you're never gonna make it up. Like you've just got to accept that, like you say, you've only got a certain amount of recovery in you. So take what you can and be okay with improving the other stuff maybe next month or the month after that or whatever. Or maybe you don't even need to improve your fitness or maybe you don't need to get stronger. This is a concept that is foreign to a lot of people, particularly those that are looking at how to be a better rugby player in the gym. like you must have tend to get it. You'll get people that are already, they're squatting 220 kilos, and they're like, okay, how can I improve my squat? And you're like, why do you need to improve your squat? You're already really strong. Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the first things, like we try and say where they are on the sort of continuum in terms of what they need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way I always kind of explain it, go, well, if getting stronger would make you a better rugby player, then all the best rugby players would be powerlifters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case. Power, like what differentiates the top players is that explosive power and speed. Obviously, that strength is part of it, but once you got up to a certain level, and I'm sure this is what you communicate with your athletes as well. Once you get a certain level, yeah, happy for it to increase, but we're not going to spend training sort of energy to improve it. If it improves via doing our,
Yeah.
explosive sort of neural stuff, then great. But and certainly maintain it, but getting more explosive and faster is what's going to really differentiate you from your opposition.
Yeah, people don't want to hear that because they built up that strength over a long period of time, or whatever it is. Maybe they're just talented, but what, like, people, that they like to train what they're already good at, and they don't like to train what they're not good at, which then, like, again, makes that problem even bigger, because then it's like, okay, what do I want to do? All right, I'm going to do squats because I don't really want to be here anyway. We're already really good at squats.
Yeah.
Or you have your runners as well, that, okay, I'll just go out and do, or maybe it's like a real fit person that wants to just do circuit training or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
they don't want to stand around and rest for 3 minutes in between sets of heavy work. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like rugby, what makes rugby like a really cool sport is that you have to be a little bit of everything. You can't just be really strong. You have to be fit. Like, or you can't just be really fit. You have to, like, it's a physical game. You have to be ready for contact. So I think that's what makes it a cool problem. And that's what attracts people, especially like people that enjoy the gym, to rugby, is that challenge. Yeah. But then you have to come at it from the complete opposite side as to how you approach the sport in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, rugby's always been good. It's had that kind of gym culture, which is good to a certain extent, but it can obviously go too far the other way. And even in, like, at the pro level, in terms of the way S&C coaches have sort of, or the industry has developed, rugby's always kind of taken it on board quite quickly. It's a kind of early adopter, and which is in an industry that's still very, extremely young. And you kind of saw these phases of, like powerlifting coaches would come in, and there'd be that sort of emphasis in the training. Then it'd be weightlifters and even kind of CrossFit. There's been that sort of period. And what you've seen now more and more, is getting better and better, is that it's more whatever works to improve the rugby performance, not like, oh, I used to be a powerlifting coach, I'll use these exercises. There's kind of elements of them all, but it's designed, again, going back to what you were saying at the start, is it's with the goal in mind of improving rugby performance. That's it, because it's a tough one. Like we said, like, rugby players want to work hard, but it's just harnessing that and using it and make sure they're actually getting out what they want from it. The speed training being the classic example.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Karen.
I just think it's also like, it gets hard. It gets really hard because it's also really abstract, as far as, like, I know we might be talking a little bit too abstract, but like, in terms of becoming a better rugby player, because you've got so much options. Yeah. Like, it becomes so hard to answer that question of, like, what exactly do you need to do? But then it also becomes like, if you have a good experience with a CrossFit coach, or if you have a good experience with someone from another sport, that could be that powerlifter's influence, but it also could just be that you're just dealing with someone really talented. Yeah. And also it could just be that you had a really lucky game. Like, it's really hard to predict actually, like, what constitutes what success is. Particularly, it must be even harder when you're working with a team, because, like, you've also got 20 other different coaches or whatever that have got their influence on the game, and they want to, and everyone's sort of vying for, okay, well, this, vying for their own time and prioritization as to where the players are spending their time. Like, deciding what caused a win and what caused a loss is like,
Yeah, I've been there when, the breakfast before a game was the reason we lost, and that. So it's so difficult in terms of like the physical approach or the way programming from it. The way we try and do it is we look at a basic performance profile of an athlete, and there's kind of got a pyramid version of it where at the bottom is body composition, then we got max strength, then we got power, then we got repeatability, and then at the top speed. And basically, where we say if you're not ticking the box for body composition right at the bottom, if you focus on improving your body composition, all the other ones will improve as well. Because if you increase your muscle mass, you're going to get stronger. And let's be honest, you're going to use strength training to do that. So you're going to get stronger. If you get leaner, you're going to be lighter. So you're going to be able to jump higher. You're going to be able to run faster, and you'll be fitter because you're not carrying that however many kgs excess. And then once you've got that ticked off, then you can focus on your max strength and get that to the standard where we think you can work on power. And that's the way we kind of do it, because that. Hopefully that sells to the athlete that is specific to them, and it's still, even if it's more general training, like if they're at the body comp phase, it's still going to improve their performance, and it's kind of designed to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah 100%. I have a pyramid as well. Fitness professionals love pyramids, man. Like that is there's so many. I think I stole the concept, but because it's such a good concept, because it does work.
Yeah.
I have aerobic base, and then body composition and movement quality at the bottom. Because I think all of those three things, like you say, if you improve that stuff at the base, it's probably going to trickle up. But stuff at the top of the pyramid, like whether that's your speed work or your out and out strength work or whatever, that doesn't necessarily trickle down.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only difference is there. Is I'd say is I have the movement. I think, but then again, it becomes really hard to quantify like what moving better is.
Yeah.
But I think most people know what it is when they see it, right? If you're working on agility, but you're planting your foot really heavily, and you're trying to drive off the inside foot, or your foot's not making poor contact with the ground, like instantly you kind of know that doesn't look right. Or if you're squatting and your heels are coming up or whatever it is, and your knees are caving in, like that's just like there's no point working on strength if you can't move properly, right? So, but then at the same time, you by fixing that stuff and whatever it is at the base of your pyramid, it's the same theory. It does help everything else, but it also but it takes a bit of time to adjust to, which I think sometimes people don't like.
Yeah.
Like particularly, I'm quite a fan of doing zone 2 work if people have the time to do it, because it doesn't eat into fatigue and whatever. But it sucks because people want to, like a lot of, especially rugby players, right? They want, as you said, they want to work hard. Yeah. Like they're like, oh, this sucks. I'm like I do it, and you're having to walk up hills, and it's like, yeah, but you're developing the qualities that you want. It's the same thing. Like you don't just do a 1 rep max set repeatedly, or even just a couple times to develop hypertrophy. Like you've got to give yourself that volume.
Yeah,
and it's hard. And it was a lot harder for me to convince people years ago, but now I'm so like convinced that it works. Like, and I've got like at this point, hundreds of people that have done it, that have been through that. Like, I'm not sure if this is actually going to make me play better. I'm not working hard enough. That have then played and gone, holy shit! Like, I feel so much more comfortable when I'm playing. Like, this is. Can I swear?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. And to be fair, that wasn't me swearing. That was someone reporting back to me. But you get so much. They just you, and it's it when you feel it. And I think that's what I enjoy about working with like. And I've worked with a number of professionals as well. But like that's what I get with working with people one-on-one, is that I don't like they can just trust me, and it's a lot easier than having to get a buy-in from a whole team to follow through it. And they can also then report back, okay, I felt better when I played that game. Whereas you could have 15 players that all feel really good, feel like they're playing their best, but still lose. and
Yeah.
still get thumped, you know, and you just wouldn't know. Whereas if you're comparing your own performance, you should be able to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Even if you're
it is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
No, great. But also a lot of what we've talked about is kind of the psychology of it, isn't it? Like we talk about you know, all the different training techniques and how we program and profile and things like that. But it all brings back to, you know, their psychology. It sounds like you've got good handle on that, and you build a good rapport with your athletes. That's really cool. Any other big mistakes that you want to vent about?
I think. I think, well, we've said training too hard, because that used to be my number one. It probably still is like training the aerobic system. Like, people don't understand that, like, because they want to work really hard.
Yeah.
And maybe even they don't have the time. So, you know, they'll do Tabatas or whatever it is, like real intense, but real short. And then they don't understand that why 30 minutes into a game, they're feeling really tired. But then you say, well, what conditioning sessions have you done that have prepared you to go for more than 30 minutes? And they haven't.
Yeah.
That's one. But for me, if we're talking about the psychology, I think this would be a nice one, is like being okay with like non-perfect weeks. Like, I think everyone is, and I don't know what it actually, I haven't got a clue what this is like at the professional level, but with everyone that I've worked with, like, they've come from a previous experience of kind of like that trying too much, falling short, feeling guilty, etc. And they're so used to failing, they're so quick to sort of almost try and give up on themselves. And I don't know if that is actually even more of a weakness, like giving themselves that easy out to say, like you say, my game's moved to Friday, I guess I can't do anything this week. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But people do that, or they say, you know, or they, you know, I can't go to the gym this week, I hurt my wrist. What? So you can't do anything? No, I'm injured. Or you know, or you know, the gym's really busy, or they have a really busy day at work on a Monday, so they've missed the gym, and all of a sudden that week's been a failure. And again, Domino's is still 2 for Tuesdays, I'm going to do that. And then all that does is make every subsequent week that much harder. Yeah. Whereas if you just be okay with minimal progress, but still progress, again, it's so much easier than trying to make everything perfect and never giving yourself any wiggle room to stick with a plan and succeed whilst things aren't perfect.
Yeah. No, so I like the idea of like punch clock workouts. Like, you know, it's not necessarily going to, you know, create a massive stimulus, but it's just getting the work in. And that's why, like, you know, you say about, I can't fit session in because I'm playing on Fridays. Like, there is a way to train and to fit something. It's always better to do something than nothing. Mm-hmm. But also, you're not every session you're expecting to get a PB. Like, that's, like you said, if we got PBs every session, we'd all be, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it's knowing that it's that cumulative thing over the weeks, months, and years that builds up to those adaptations. And we don't have to get a PB. We don't have to, you know, completely, like, going back to the training too hard thing. We don't have to smash ourselves every workout. It's a bit of a kind of Instagram meme. It's like, you know, out of 100 sessions, like 50 will be average, 25 will be terrible, and maybe 10 will be like awesome. But that's what it is essentially. You know, there's only a percentage of them where we're going to feel real good and get, especially playing rugby, because, you know, different teams, different opposition, different styles of game, different weather conditions. Like, you'll come in on a Monday and you know, you're not gonna feel as good as, you know, the week before when you know, it was dry weather, it was an easy team, you're just running tries in for fun. And even the psychological side of it, that's got to be taken into, like, that's one thing you see in the pro environment, is you have a big win and everyone's, you know, cock-hoop, feeling amazing and can lift really well. And then, you know, other weeks when you've had a few back-to-back losses, it's you know, really hard to get that kind of, you know, just that mental arousal to train.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I remember speaking to Keir, and he said the same. He said he was the best score he'd ever seen on their, you know, their pre-training questionnaires was the day after they beat, I can't remember who they beat, but they beat someone to get to the Rugby World Cup quarterfinal, and Maradona was in there partying with them. So they'd obviously, they'd have been out drinking. They'd had a real tough physical game, but the next day they felt physically the best they felt like ever, according to the questionnaire. And that's simply, again, like you say, buzzing off that big win.
Yeah,
definitely.
And I mean, and that also shows that you can't always take how you. And one kind of a mistake we see sometimes is like players just going, how I feel will dictate what I do, and it's not always true, because sometimes you feel like it's kind of classic. I'm not sore, I can train fine, but has your nervous system recovered? From that can take longer. Is that something you see?
I don't know. It's not too common, because I think we don't have the high of. I haven't dealt with any players that have had the high of partying with Maradona, but also just in general, I think I do, but I never really turn the dial up to 10 with the vast majority of the training that we're doing, unless we're really preparing for it. Just because I want to always leave room until we absolutely know for certain. I always want to leave room to keep improving next week. And that might hold me back in, weeks 1, 2, 3, for, however long we're running this program for. But I do think long term, it just makes sense, because maybe I could have improved on week 2 or week 3 by extra 2.5%, 5%. But the risk of that actually completely derailing everything is bigger than that 2.5%. And we're going to get to that improvement within the weeks to come anyway, if we stay consistent. The only time you would take that is if you were on an absolute massive time crunch, and then you had to do it. Otherwise, more often than not, it's the opposite. What I found is work stress really does make me want to pull back.
Yeah.
No matter what, even if they say they're feeling good, if they're having intensive weeks of work, and more often than not, actually, if I know someone's got a heavy workload, or something going on with their family or whatever, there's a good chance we'll just deload, and I'm happy to deload for even a couple of weeks, because the damage of running into the ground and the cycle that'll set someone on to, just, it's not worth it. And even if you're deloading, we know how, if we're doing it for the mental benefits, we can do enough so that you feel good. If we're doing, and again, we can deload and do zone 2 work, so we can still really develop the aerobic system. We can still get better.
Yeah.
But we're just taking away from all of that volume, because I think, and this is probably, I was going to ask you what you found the biggest difference is between working with athletes and amateurs. And obviously the biggest one for me, or for what the general people would imagine, is that it's not just time, it's the stress. You don't just have that. You could even if you could work around the amount, or you could figure out a way to train the same as the exact same. In fact, I did a video on this. There's a really popular video on YouTube. I think it's some guy for a Welsh newspaper ate and trained like a rugby player, and he was going to do it for 6 weeks.
Right.
But he quit after 3 because he got a hernia. Honestly, it's the most ridiculous video, because all he did, and actually it was like a supplement ad, because it was some supplement company funded this guy to do this. But he was training so much, and he was just burning himself into the ground. And where professional rugby players go off and, for the most part, play video games or just relax, and then as they get older, maybe they start to do family life and develop business. But all of that is kind of a lot lower stress than the working a full-time job. This guy was still working his full-time job as a writer, I'm assuming. Yeah. And he got a hernia because he just had a absolute massive increase in his stress. I was you couldn't have written a better video. It's hilarious. But
you're right. Right? With pro athletes, the times you see when that type of thing really takes effect is with younger, academy players is when like they're still in uni and having exams and things like that, and like Premiership academies will actually ease back during those periods because they know that stress is going to spike. And then the other one with players, like if you ever want to be really good as an athlete, don't have kids, because newborn kids, because it affects the sleep, affects your recovery, probably pretty stressed as well, arguing with the missus, so it all adds up, and it goes back to what we were saying before about that adaptive energy. That stress is another thing, that's another training modality that they're trying to recover from, essentially. The body treats stress the same, as a physical sort of threat. And I did have another point on that, as you were saying about training, but it's gone. That's really frustrating. It's a good point. Oh yeah, I think it's about that was it a journalist doing that. It kind of what we touched on before, that they're then suddenly doing a training program for a professional rugby player when they haven't done the steps before, like you said, the aerobic base,
100%, yeah,
quality in the body comp. No wonder they got a.
Honestly, it was hilarious. But yeah, I think that would be the other difference, right? So actually, this is your question. Like, the biggest difference between amateurs and professionals, now that you've had enough experience working with both, outside of the overall general underlying stress that like amateur players are going to experience outside of rugby, is there anything else that, like, if you're an amateur player and you're looking at what the pros are doing, you're like, no, don't do this because of whatever reason?
Yeah, well, I guess it comes down, and you pretty much answered it in your the previous bit, because you're saying when you look at amateur players and professional players, the difference is the recovery. So you could do the same amount of training as them, because I think sometimes if you don't see what they're doing, you think they're training from 9 to 5 constantly on the pitch, which, like, we know they're not. Physically they couldn't recover from that, but like I say, they've got the time just on the console, going for a coffee, meet with other rugby players and talk about rugby. That's when they're recovering from it, whereas the amateurs have to go to work. Even if it's not a physical job, it's still stress on them. They don't have that time to recover, so it's usually you've got to dial back the intensity slightly and dial back the volume. Like, you'd be surprised, people can, but, and I'm sure you've seen it, people can build up to some pretty impressive stuff as amateurs, but initially you've got to start a little bit further back. Like I said, with that journalist, you've got to start on the ones and twos and build up to those 8s and 9s and 10s. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I think probably could happen, and this is because I've not been exposed to too many different environments, like where I'm experiencing like a full training week, outside of the ones I've experienced as a player. Like, I think the other thing that you'll find is, I think amateurs have so much more time to still develop that base. Whereas a lot of professionals, because they put in the work or because they just have that much talent, they don't have to work on their base abilities, and so they will spend a lot more time. Like, particularly when you look at like the stuff like the most popular training stuff that gets put out is like when it's the Lions or when it's England rugby. Like, you're talking like the top percentage of not just athletes as far as genetics, but also where they are at in their careers as well. Like, they're at the top of the mountain, so or the pyramid, I guess. They're at the top. They've reached the top, right? And so they are working those tiny areas. And also, like, as far as a social media post or an interesting video, like, that's the stuff that's going to have people watching it and think is really cool. Like, you're not going to share someone's 45 minutes of zone 2 on a watt bike. Like, that's not gonna make any cut of any video that's remotely interesting.
Yeah.
But that's probably, I would assume, I don't know with it too much, but that's probably what's going on as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's like you said earlier, it's so hard to go, even if you go and visit and talk to the staff there, you go and visit one of those teams, and I've been fortunate enough to go and visit the England during the Six Nations and things, watch their training camps, and it's so hard to judge just on that one thing, because, like you said, it's it depends on their periodization, how long they've had this group of athletes together, over the years, and what week into the campaign they are and things like that, what games they've got coming up. and you know, the injury profile of players. There's so many, and like I've seen some of those videos on YouTube where they, like, S&C coaches gone in and criticised these, you know, top teams. It goes, but you don't know why they're doing that without knowing the kind of justification. And like, it goes back to, you know, the way I deal with questions about certain things. Well, why? What is the approach? And you know, there's, you know, thousands of ways to skin a cat, but it's got to have the right reasoning. So it's so difficult to judge them based on that.
And at the end of the day, they're being judged solely pretty much on whether they win or lose on the weekend.
Yeah. And
so, like, could they try and get that little extra mental edge or whatever it is that they're using?
Yeah.
Versus trying to put a 0.001 extra percent on their physical abilities. Like,
yeah,
it is really difficult to judge why and whether, and the success on it.
Yeah,
for sure.
What about like nutrition wise? I'll tell you, one of my ones I see a lot, which really frustrates me, is sort of getting towards the end of the season, getting into, or sort of in the northern hemisphere, getting to the end of the season, and it's getting to the summer, and boys start like cutting out carbs from their diet because I'm trying to get lean, and you're like, well, yeah, but you've got important games coming up, and you know, hopefully cup finals and things like that, when surely you want to be fueling that, but it's totally the other mindset. Is that anything you've seen, or what are your other nutritional ones?
Yeah, like I wouldn't have thought this a while back, like a good few years back when I first started doing this, but under eating is like a huge problem with amateur athletes as well. Like, you know, we live in a world where like eating like shit is so easy.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you decide that you're going to, your mentality has to change, and really that's for the better anyway, for you as a person. Like, we shouldn't, like, even if you have no interest in increasing your rugby performance, like, or physical performance, like, the Western diet is just terrible.
Yeah.
Like, but where it succeeds is it's super convenient and super easy to just get in, or actually super tasty. That would be the other benefit of it, right? But the problem is like, most people then think, okay, I'm going to be an athlete, I'm going to eat, you know, natural foods or whatever it is, and all of a sudden they're eating, you know, as a 100-kilo guy or an 80-kilo guy, even like 1,800 calories at most, you know, and I think you're never going to develop any, or you can develop performance with such little calories, but it's like riding your bike with flat tires. Like, it's so much more difficult. And then what happens is, because they're so used to under eating, like, actually eating enough becomes a chore, because they're just, you know, eating is just a habit thing that people do. No one, you know, they don't really think about having to eat. Like, it's just a thing that they wait till their body tells them they're hungry, and then they just chuck something down. But it's just like, if you want to perform your best, you want to give yourself all the best fuel and all the best opportunity to adapt to the training stimulus and perform at your best when it comes to every single training session. And I think, yeah, you're right. Like, under eating is huge. You know, maybe under eating on protein. Under eating on protein goes both ways. Like, if you're dealing with people that have read enough men's fitness, they know the importance of protein so much, but they don't think about anything else.
Yeah, because when you said sort of under eating protein, I was going to say my experience with rugby players is they're usually quite clued on to protein, because like, it's been overdone, but then everything else kind of goes out the window.
100%. And then a lot of people that don't think about it will naturally tend to undereat. So it can go both ways. But if they're okay with their protein, they usually, like you say, missing out on everything else. And I think my bugbear on it is that it is really easy once you get down to a routine. But like, if you're just completely unaware of your routine, like, or you let it slip and you just fall back into old habits, there's a good chance, like, there's a reason that like nutrition and the fitness industry is just growing exponentially. It's because people are just for the most part eating junk and not moving enough. And so if you can just do those things, like, that's going to make you a better human, which, like, if we're looking at that would be like the foundation of the base of the pyramid, right? Like just being a better performing human is going to help you on the rugby pitch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, an argument would be health should be the very bottom of that pyramid, shouldn't it? Which obviously nutrition is so important for. But it's even got to the point where, you know, if someone eats like a healthy meal, someone goes, "Oh, what diet are you on?" It's like, well, just eating health. You know, it's not a diet. It's just it's normal.
It's unfortunate. Like this is where I was going with the Western diet being terrible. Like, instantly, like you have to in the supermarket, in most restaurants, you're immediately eliminating 70% of what's available to you.
Yeah.
Right, instantly. Like you're not even comprehending. Like, and I'm lucky that I discovered this at 17 or whatever. Like that stuff is just you can have it as a rare treat, but that's a treat.
Yeah.
Right. It still blows my mind, and maybe there are McDonald's listeners to this. I'm not trying to be elitist, but it blows my mind that people would go and get a Big Mac for lunch on a Tuesday. But that happens because the drive-through at McDonald's on a Tuesday is like, there are lines outside on a Tuesday afternoon. Like,
yeah.
But it doesn't make sense to me. And so once you wrap your head around that you're constricted to, which isn't really constricting yourself, but you're instantly taking off 70% of stuff as menu as standard. You can have that stuff as a treat, and that's absolutely fine. But you acknowledge that as a treat. That makes a huge difference. I'm actually a vegetarian, so when I switched to becoming a vegetarian, it was actually kind of easy because I just to make that change, because I was already I already had a good diet, and I just replaced most of my chicken with like other stuff, and that was kind of it. I think it's hard when you try and feel some level of social pressure, or just try to you get food industry stuff just constantly rammed down your throat of what you're supposed to do. Once you understand that, I think eating like an athlete can be and should be really easy.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's interesting to say that it's kind of it's more getting away from that kind of that pull from the media or whatever, or just that kind of consumer society that we've got, rather than all the nutritional side of it. It's crazy.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say as well, though, is you've said about how your professional athletes have a lot more recovery, and people will say, and you this is more for the younger people, I think, but older athletes can fall guilty of this too. Is like the younger people think, well, that's because they've also got access to all these supplements, and they do, but how much of a difference do you think that really makes on their recovery?
Oh, so you're asking?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's, if we're talking pyramids, that's the very, very top, isn't it? They're called supplements for a reason. They're supplement to your actual nutrition. So if you're not eating whole foods in terms of the nutrition thing, but just in terms of everything, holistically looking at it, it's such a tiny percentage of the adaptations they'll get. Supplements help, but they're not gonna if you've got a terrible program, a supplement is going to make it a good response. And you'd be surprised how little you actually need in terms of supplement. There's only a few that have been shown to be effective, and they're the boring ones that aren't really promoted as well. Say again?
I said, and they're the boring ones that aren't really promoted and expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Like let's not start about branched chain amino acids, which are just in all protein.
But yeah, I think supplements and just in general, like recovery, I would say that's another misstep that people take, is that rather than, and it goes back to what we've been talking about this whole time really, is rather than doing too much, they do too much, and then they look to add potentially more by saying, okay, I'm going to do recovery.
Yeah.
I still don't know what doing recovery looks like. Yeah,
obviously, when I say they have more recovery, I don't mean they're going to a pool and doing this. I mean they're not training. That's whereas amateurs are like, well, I'm not training. No, you're at work, which is stress, which is digging into your recovery, your energy reserves essentially. So
100%.
Good point to bring up. So another question we always ask on the podcast, and it would be interesting coming from you because slightly different sort of background as an S&C coach. What advice would you give to an upcoming strength coach?
The best advice, and the one that always keeps coming back to me, or the one that I keep on relearning, is like, just be a good person. It sounds so cliche, and I'm almost annoyed at myself for saying it, but I'm not, because it needs to be said.
Yeah.
Like, even if you look at the highest echelons of professional rugby, people are hired because they're good people and people enjoy their company. Like, yes, knowledge is a part of it, but like, what's his name? Paul Strigen.
Yeah.
Dude, like,
great character. Yeah.
Like, people love him, and he could be spouting out stuff that's like 30 years old and been completely outdated and doesn't work. I'm not saying he does do that. Like, I'm sure he knows his stuff, but he goes on all the Lions tours. He gets like the top invites because he's just a good dude and everyone loves him. Like, in general, I know too many coaches that like are good people, or actually no, I know too many people that know a lot, but they're not worried about personal skills. They're just worried about their knowledge. And like, I think at the end of the day, if you're coaching people, you're coaching people. So that there's a big, like, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you've got, if you can't filter that down to someone being on your team, like, not literally being on your team, but being on your side and acknowledging what you've got to say and trusting in you to do what that you think is best, then it doesn't really matter. And that's probably why we have like so much as far as like BS in the industry, because people still want to hear nonsense. And if you've got enough people that, not necessarily, I wouldn't even say they're good people, but that they're charismatic enough to put it across, like, people will lap that up, because we live in a capitalistic society. So if people want to buy nonsense because it makes themselves feel better, there are charismatic enough people to sell them nonsense, Yeah,
no, definitely. It's a great point. And on a kind of sad note, but someone like you mentioned, Paul Strigen, Steve Black, who unfortunately he passed away this week, and just looking through the comments on the posts on LinkedIn, and it was like, this guy has touched a lot of people, and that's what you want to have. You want to have that effect on people. So it kind of got me thinking, crikey, what would people say about me? After I'm gone. It's. But maybe that's a good way to start your career, is think about that, because then you'll kind of act in a way that's going to, leave people have a good regard of you.
Yeah, I think the other thing, and this was probably what I would be like after saying be a good person, is part of that is understanding it's not, if you're a coach, like, it's not about you. It's never about, like, it's not about you at all. And we're seeing this change, particularly like if you follow anything of the NCAA football, like the American football is like, the college strength coach is becoming a bit of a meme.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not good, because like and then just in general, like, the coach's job is to facilitate, like, their existence is to facilitate the success of someone else.
Yeah.
So it's good that people would, but like, even like Blackie, like people aren't commenting saying, "Oh, that was great that you were responsible for the success of whoever, whatever players or whatever." No, they're saying what a good person that you were. And like, they say the same thing, and this is something that stuck with me about Sir Alex Ferguson, was like, he knew the name of everyone that worked at Old Trafford. Like, he knew everyone at the staff at Man United. And like, you think this is probably get the guy that's going to go down as one of the best coaches to have ever existed.
Yeah.
And he still took the time to be a really good person to everyone he could be. And that's something that I still, when I do my rugby coaching, I still want to try and improve on that, because I do think that that's huge. And that's something that, like, particularly in this Instagram age, can be easily lost if you're a famous quote unquote coach. Like, it's not like if you're a really good coach, you're making everyone else look really good. Yeah. And then by association, you can look good, but it's not about you. And if you understand that, then you'll have good success.
Yeah. And I think some of the names that have been thrown, like Paul Sturgeon, Steve Black, Alex Ferguson, they're people that players would play for. They turn up and play for them, and if you can have that, that's half more than half the battle.
Yeah.
Just to have that, whether it's part of creating the environment. I always talk about the environment being so important from S&C perspective, and if you've got that where people want to play. And not that means you're special, but just you create that environment that they want to turn up and play. And those three are definitely ones that kind of makes you think they had that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So tell us a bit more about Rugby Muscle, and then sort of where people can sort of find out more about you and get hold of you.
They can follow the Instagram is being pushed a little bit. At Rugby Muscle. YouTube's probably where you're going to get the best information from me. So just again, Rugby Muscle on YouTube, it will come up. Tons of playlists, tons of videos there. Again, not like the most popular because we can't give black and white information because we have to. I try and help people understand how to build out a program. I really try and put value into the YouTube videos. And then some of the videos also make the podcast, so that's just Rugby Muscle as well.
Yeah, cool. And just tell us a bit more about your program and what you do.
So we have, depending on when this goes out, we might have a new program coming out, but otherwise it's just like, and for the longest time, this is all I've done was just one-on-one coaching, because it's just it's just the best way to solve your problem as a player. Yeah. Even as an amateur, like to have someone in your corner, so you outsource all your thinking, but have everything done for you. Like I believe in it so much. I have a coach, I think it's just the best service. And then everything else would have taken away from it. But it got to the point where I did want to develop a little lower price point for those that really did kind of want coaching, but literally just couldn't afford it. Couldn't afford it because they're spending money on 3 different cars or something, but actually couldn't afford it. Yeah. And so we created Team Rugby Muscle, which is just a program that was apps, but the more I use different apps, the more they frustrate me. So now it's just a membership site with a download. Like each month they'll get a new program downloadable to a Google Sheets account. But that way it's the same sort of thing. But even though we spent this whole time saying that just generally being a better rugby player is hard to like define as a goal, we try and tackle that as best we can. And because it's a membership site, we can also give you feedback as far as like different circumstances, different goals and stuff, how to adapt the program, because it's done in Google Sheets. It's kind of done easy.
Yeah. No, it sounds cool. Yeah, and like similar approach to us. Part of the good thing is that they can communicate with us easily, and it's troubleshooting those little things. Like giving them the program's one thing, but like we said, there's always those little things that come up where it's a little injury, the change of trying to change the training week, and we can give them advice on that. So it's cool. And like I said, coaching is so important. Whether it's just to save you a bit of mental RAM for your own work, or just setting you on the right direction for what's going to work for you.
Yeah, I think it's something that people miss in rugby as well, and obviously like especially like amateur rugby, because you've got 1, maybe 2 coaches that you're dealing with that are like that. Yes, they're your coach, but they're your team's coach. Yeah. So their job is just to have the team win, and if that means not playing you at all, or that means not even developing you at all, like they're still doing their job, and that's like no hard feelings against them, but that's not benefiting you as a rugby player. So that's why I think the coaching works quite well, is because I've got that experience as well. So I've helped guys like navigate trying to change a club, navigate getting back into rugby, etc., etc. There's so many different circumstances, and that's why I do think that is. So you guys, what do you guys do as far as Rugby Renegade is concerned, Jamie? Because obviously we're posting this on mine as well. So
it's funny, yeah, it's kind of polarized to yours. We initially started out with a membership program, so that's kind of our sort of flagship product. And just over the years, we've started doing a bit more, so some sort of more specific programs based on, those individual goals, whether it's sort of body composition or maximum strength, that type of thing. And we're planning to add more as we go through, and then just more sort of one-to-one coaching. That's kind of progressed more, kind of because of the way our careers have changed. I've got a bit more time now that Bedford semi-pro, so I can put more time into doing one-to-one coaching. I didn't want to do it when I couldn't devote the time to the so that's better now, and I can devote more time, so it's cool.
That must feel quite nice as well, like dealing with people one-on-one, and just the simplicity compared to having to get a whole squad of dudes.
30 lads and trying to keep them all firing in the same direction.
Sure. Cool, mate.
TJ, it's been great talking to you, some great insights, and it's been, probably could have gone for another couple of hours.
Likewise. Yeah, we'll do it again, mate.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get Rob onto your podcast as well. You can talk all about physio and injury prevention and everything.
Awesome.
Be good to talk to.
Cool, mate.
Mate, thanks, and all the best for the future.
No, thank you. All right, hey there, it's TJ once again. Thank you for listening to that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm just here one more time. I know you thought you were rid of me, but I've got something pretty cool that I want to send your way. I've tried to condense all the most important things that you need to make progress: the training, the mindset, the nutrition, everything you hear in these podcasts and more, presented in a free 2-week program called Rugby Muscle Kickoff. Through Kickoff, you'll have access to 2 weeks of emails delivered directly to your inbox, 2 weeks of videos, education, and interaction, and access to tools, strategies, tactics previously reserved only for paying clients. To join, simply click the link in the description of this podcast, the one that says Kickoff, or if you want to go old school and type it out, then crack on, access it at rugby-muscle.com/kickoff, all one word. Cheers for listening to the podcast. See you guys next time.